So I told you it was going to happen, and what I told you was that sooner or later these Brexiteers are going to start to admit something, that Brexit isn't going well. And lo and behold, who's the first person that admits it's not going well? Well, it's Daniel Hannan. The article reading from today is by John Ellengard from the New Statesman. But again, I told you so, this was what was going to happen. So this is what Hannan said just recently. So, not working out the way you thought, Hannan, is it? I am being asked the question every day by angry Europhiles, and to be fair, they've got a point. I had assumed by now that we'd have had reached broad national consensus around a moderate form of withdrawal that recognised the narrowness of the result, a Brexit that left a number of our existing agreements while allowing us to leave the aspects of the EU which all sides could agree were harmful, such as the agricultural and fishery policies and the common external tariff. And that's what basically he said only a couple of days ago. So the article begins with, so Daniel Hannan's latest brain fart over at the Conservative home. The article is mainly an excuse to kick the Labour Party for pushing what the Tory MEP describes as the worst of all world outcomes, in which Britain would leave the single market but remain in the customs union. But the sight of Captain Britain, the first Brexiteer, suggests that things were not going quite to plan, has even been more novel enough to win coverage in the newspapers of the Evening Standard at least. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that George Osborne is not a fan of Daniel Hannan. So Hannan has the gall for blaming the left for the messes which his very own side are obviously responsible for. But for kicks, let's consider some of the other reasons why Brexit might not be going quite the way the Liberal leavers had hoped. So perhaps the real reason we have failed to reach national consensus from what form Brexit should take is because of an onslaught from the Leave campaigners and newspapers, which have positioned anyone who so much as questions the government Brexit strategy not as a reasonable opponent, but as a traitor. Perhaps it is because the line, "you lost, get over it," is not in fact the best way of demonstrating to the vanquished opponents that compromise is the order of the day. Or perhaps it is because winning the referendum in the first place required those few outward-looking Liberal leavers, those who genuinely cared about abstract notions of sovereignty and the ability of the government to negotiate its own trade deals, to ally with the rather large group of distinctly liberal leavers who couldn't give a fig for such things, but no, they don't really like the immigration or modernity very much. Perhaps it's because the prominent members of the former group did not spend enough time calling out the latter, instead focusing their fire on those of us who always thought Brexit was a silly idea in the first place. Or perhaps it's because the referendum was won with talk of benefits of the single market, but with lies plastered in because lies plastered onto buses about the cost of the EU membership, with leaflets erroneously claiming that Turkey was about to join the EU, giving it an open land border with Syria and Iraq, and with Nigel Farage grinning in front of posters with anonymous hordes of sinister-looking brown people. Perhaps there is a reason why so many politicians are in favour of keeping Britain in the customs union. Perhaps it's because there is no plausible model in which we can leave it without creating a hard border with the European Union. Either messing up lives creating a border on the island of Ireland, or messing up the entire United Kingdom by creating a border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Perhaps this is the sort of thing that someone who spent 25 years of campaigning for Brexit might be expected to have given some thought to. But as you can see, And as I said before, no, they've never given any thought to this. Perhaps it is not going well because the single market membership has historically been inseparable from the freedom of movement, and no one on the Leave side has proved capable of the sort of European charm offensive that would be necessary even to begin to shift the European position on that. Perhaps it's because every single one of them has instead chosen to brief friendly newspapers, instead using the kind of language that implies they are not, at this stage, willing to rule out war with Spain. Or perhaps the explanation is simpler. Perhaps if no consensus has been reached about what Brexit should look like, it's because none of the people who spent decades campaigning for it gave even the slightest thought as to how this shit show would actually work. Perhaps it was because a good deal was always going to be proved impossible. And perhaps Daniel Hannan is just wrong. You broke it, you own it, say some Ramonas, whether anyone complains about the way things are developing, Hannan writes in his own concluding paragraph. But we liberal leavers don't own it. Yet you do, Daniel. This is the world you brought forth, and your simply asserting your innocence is not enough to abdicate responsibility for it. It is not enough to win a referendum. It is not enough to act shocked at the lack of consensus after years in which you've done nothing that might create one. And it is not enough to blame your opponents for the world's failure to live up to your fantasies about it. But at least one matter, at least you were right. No, Daniel, this isn't how it's supposed to be working out. And that is just the first. I guarantee you, the first of such, I think, attacks by people like Hannan. And the guy who wrote this, John Edge, who wrote this in the New Statesman, is completely correct. Everything they have done, they have been campaigning for years and years on this. I mean, Daniel Hannan, it's right there. 25 years he spent campaigning for this. So you'd have thought that in those 25 years, he might have come up with a strategy about how to solve this Northern Ireland border issue. But he hasn't. No one has. Because there was no plan. Because they don't give a monkeys about the cause, the damage, and anything else they would do. Because they lived in this fantasy world. And now all these fantasies are just disappearing into the ether because reality is far stronger than this economic fantasy that they've so long hoped for. Are we going to end up staying in the single market? I think probably higher likely we will at this point. I think we're also definitely going to end up staying in the customs union. So, then it's only a matter of time before we just go back in. You know, because sooner or later people are going to realise, yeah, this was a bad idea, and I've said it before. People like this are going to get who are the real people to blame for this. Daniel Hannan has said for years about, oh, it's going to be great. You know, getting a deal will be easy. We'll all be sorted out. Boom, but you know, all this be easy. I'm trying to remember who it was in the Brexit film. I don't think it was Daniel Hannan. I think it was someone else. That literally goes, Britain would have an economic reality that we have never dreamed of outside the EU. And yet, here we are, almost 2 years after Brexit. Nothing has been decided. We're going to end up crashing out. If nothing does get decided, it's just going to end in an absolute abstract failure because basically Theresa May wants to keep her party together over the national interests of this country. And remember, the vast, people in actual MPs in the Conservative Party, the vast number of them don't want to leave the EU or the single market. But the problem is that they're even split on that. So the real reason is the Conservative Party is probably split into like 5 or 6 factions. You know, with the you've got your super hard Brexiteers of we should just leave and just walk away, regardless. You've then got the people who want, oh no, we need a free trade agreement before we leave. You've then got the ones who are going, oh no, we need to stay in the customs union. You've then got the ones who, oh no, we need to stay in the customs union and the single market. So Theresa May has a very, very fractured party. But there is a big consensus on basically wanting to stay in the single market and the customs union. So that you have to ask the question of, if you want to stay in those two things, why are you even bothering to leave the EU? And you now start to see and start to question all these people, and particularly you've got people like Aaron Banks who funded these campaigns, like particularly the unofficial Leave campaign, and all you've got from them is they want to leave the EU because basically of the regulations that the EU has put in place. That's basically their reason for funding all this. You've got also the billionaire from New Zealand who funds on purpose destabilising political movements so that he can come in after the disaster and just buy everything up cheaply and then sell it on. This is not this isn't a secret. This is something that has been well known. I mean, you had Mark Dyson, of all people, literally saying, yeah, I want to make my workers work overtime and force them to work it. And by the way, he can do that if they get rid of that regulation. And that was an EU directive. So I've said before, get ready to have to fight for all the workers' rights and stuff we've gained over the last 10 to 20 years have come from the EU, not the government itself. The government's just rubber stamped it and said, yeah. But you will now have to fight because, as I've said, the Henry VIII laws were incredibly, I'd think, incredibly dangerous. As it was read, as we go back into that article, you look at it and it was basically, 5 Conservative MPs could walk into a room, say, we don't like that regulation, gone. Just 5 MPs could do that. And not even MPs from different parties, just 5 Conservative MPs. There would be no votes on this law or anything. It'd just be gone. Which would basically mean your workers' rights and your protection could be gone over. It could be there on on the Thursday and could be gone by the Friday. But this is a lot of the stuff that people really don't seem to really care for. But that's what, unfortunately, now we could potentially have to face if we, end up, completely crashing out. But again, like I say, they haven't passed these Henry VIII laws, which is, again, is another battle in Parliament. And now you've got Theresa May calling off the other one, which I think was over the customs union. So, you've got a Prime Minister who's not so much a leader, who's more trying to essentially play Twister to keep her party together. You've got Jeremy Corbyn, who knows full well that his party backs staying in the customs union and single market. You've got other people, other campaigns who are now massively picking up steam, basically calling for a people's vote, which one of the options will be to basically stay as we are, remain an EU member, which is the logical way to go. And bear in mind, I've done all these things mainly from articles and things that have been written, by other people. I'm by no means an expert, and I will never profess to be an expert on the EU. There are hundreds of people out there who are certainly more knowledgeable in the EU than I am, but it's bizarre that even though you have all these experts, even the government's very own analysis, post-Brexit, by the way, who said, yeah, if we leave, these are going to be the analyses, and none of them were good. But again, that's just Project Fear. So, yeah, looks like Project Fear has slowly turned into Project Reality. But, you know, do these leavers want to admit maybe there's going to be a problem? Maybe we need to stay in the customs union? Maybe we need to stay in the single market? No. No. Because they've been told and brought up to live in this fancy world, just like Daniel Hannan. And just like all these people, just as his article said, they've spent all this time campaigning to leave, and then now they've got what they wanted, they've now just gone, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, as the article put there, you'd have thought Daniel Hannan would have put time into trying to think of ways to solve this Northern Irish border situation. He hasn't. You know, that's your expert, not mine. It's your experts that don't have a clue. My experts have been warning you since the very beginning all this stuff could happen. You just discounted them because you didn't like what they had to say. And, you know, sad day for you when you now have to rely on these experts. Because you will have to rely on them sooner or later. And you will have to sit up and pay attention to them.